All right, here we go. We got a fun episode of Connect This loading up. We cut away from that intro theme right before that dude fell right off the water tower because he did not engage proper climbing technique. So we wanted
first, Chris. Safety first.
Safety first,
Right.
absolutely. One of the things that we talk about at the tribal broadband boot camps is that actually making sure your crews are like certified and everything else saves you money because they are more effective, they're more confident, they can work faster when they know the proper techniques. So that's a fun way to start the show.
And they don't die. Yes, that's always.
And they don't die. Yes, replacing people is expensive. Our investigations and lawsuits can be expensive. It can be a real drag on the whole company, frankly. I'm Chris Mitchell from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Still haven't figured out in 109 episodes how to start a show. We've got Kim McKinley from TAC Builders.
Broadband? No, it's Broadband. Shush. And so you have two people from construction companies on this Connect This, and we understand the importance of safety there, Mr. Mitchell. So we can give you a lesson in it one day, but safety is very important for all of us. But now moving on.
Excellent. We've got Doug Dawson from CCG Consulting out in Nashville. How you doing, Doug?
Well, my very first job was climbing towers. I learned that stuff really early in my career. So yes.
Was that before or after you were a professional football player?
Oh, this was actually before. It was while I was in college. Yes. So it was, I hated it. There's nothing like being on a tower when it's like 30 degrees out and windy and raining.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The thing, I think that always impresses me is how much those suckers move. They really move.
Oh, they move. Yes. Yes.
How did the safety? No. We have to ask this. How did the safety vest look over the Grateful Dead T-shirt back in those days?
Back then, they just had a belt. I'll bet.
Well, no. In those days, you could actually buy tie-dye safety vests. So, come on. This is.
We've got Travis Carter from USI Fiber. Welcome.
Oh, God, I'm struggling to find a joke, Doug. Were you operating in the AM band or what? Yeah, it was flags back then, right, Doug? So
Yes. Semaphores from the flag, yes.
I'm well, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you for your hospitality and running this show today. I think your introduction's quite good, actually, so.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Travis is maybe entering dementia, so we'll have to keep an eye on him.
Well, we're frozen here. I just realized I hadn't left the house all week, so yes, it might be right.
We've got Heather Mills from Tilson, I'm going to say technology.
Tilson Technology Management, yeah, a multi-specialty telecommunications firm. That's right.
I just wanted to show Kim that I can get it right when I care.
Oh, snap. Okay, fight on. Okay, Chris,
Okay.
I won't agree with anything you have to say today. Let's go.
This is going to be a show.
In the
But
green room.
Doug, are you afraid of heights? Like, is that part
No.
of why you didn't like it? Yeah, like
No,
that's a job.
I actually.
Everyone
lied.
should know this.
Yeah.
Climbing towers, like that's a job I don't want either, and I'm willing to do almost anything because climbing up something that high.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, the height I just did not like that being out in the weather when it was horrible. So yeah.
I imagine it would be nice on a summer day, but
No, even there, the metal gets hot. There's all sorts of times of the year where it's really not good. So yeah.
So we in the pre-room established that we are all feeling pugnacious. We're coming in with a lot of energy. So you've seen some of that already. We also talked about vegetables. So feel free to throw in the chat any questions you have about broadband or your favorite or least favorite vegetables.
But did you finish your whatever drywalling project? We just have to make sure we get caught up on that. Okay.
Oh,
sorry.
No, it's a home project. And so there's no finishing. You just get, like it's an asymptote. You do 75%. And then in the next year you do 20%. And you get a little closer. So I'm moving forward on it. But as Travis said, it got cold again. So I had to stop. We are going to talk about BEAD a lot today. We're going to talk about the ACP pretty early on. We're going to talk about the Starlink Residential Lite plan. Probably talk briefly about the OpenVault report and how people are using the internets nowadays, and possibly a little bit on, it seems like a number of companies are shutting the doors, bankruptcy or closing down. So maybe that's a trend. Maybe it's not. On BEAD, we particularly brought in Heather. If you didn't catch Community Broadband Bits yet, the show from this week features Heather. We talked about what's next for some of these states. We talked a little bit more about Washington. We're going to talk about that some today, but probably not in that same level of entirely. And I wanted to start off by a story that I just threw in here, because I like to start with something short and easy. And it was about Texas College Station, was it, where Amazon was doing experiments with drones and delivering it. And for me, I threw it in there because I remember I was at I was at Mountain Connect, wonderful event. I think we were actually in the mountains still before it was moved to Denver, but wonderful show to be there in August. And in Mountain Connect, they had a futurist, and he was talking about how the future was going to have drones delivering all kinds of stuff, and drones this and drones that. And I was like, I think this guy's deaf. Like, I think the only person that sees a future for drones across our communities is A, the communities have no power to stop them, or B, everyone's deaf because they're loud and obnoxious. And that's what they found in Texas. Anyone else interested in that story?
I think it's just another duh moment on this show. Like, of course, that not everybody wants drones all around their house and the noise that it creates. Noise pollution is a real thing. And so, yes, the convenience is there, but Amazon can also get me stuff to my house right now within 3 hours, and they use a car too. So,
right. Also, they can get you stuff that's heavier than toothpaste. Go ahead, Doug.
I have a boomerang, and I can't wait till they get to my neighborhood because I'm going to try like hell to hit one of them. By the way, playing with a boomerang is really fun if you never tried. So,
mostly I found boomerangs are one direction items. I never figured out how to throw them right.
I think you're using it wrong, Mr. Mitchell. You're using it wrong.
Travis, did you have any reactions to this little appetizer of a story?
No, the only thing I thought I could never figure out is, like, every drone I've ever had never has enough battery capacity to run that far. So unless you're trying to deliver like 4 blocks away, but why don't you just finish driving? So yeah, I mean, I commend them for trying. I'm not sure that was really overly practical.
Heather, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or if you just want to skip and we can jump into ACP where you'll have more fun.
Oh, there's nothing more fun than this entire show.
Let me just say,
she's already lost it.
ACP or drones, Christopher Mitchell? ACP or drones? And you're saying Heather likes the ACP. Fair enough.
Me droning on or talking about drones? Go ahead, Heather.
This is why science is important and funding for research is important. We wouldn't know that we hate the sound of drones if they hadn't have done that. But also, I'm sure that they were trying to do some research and development on any number of practical applications that drones might help expand their ability to deliver in order to make more money, because that's what businesses do. So, I mean, there's any number of reasons why that wouldn't work. I'm still sort of fascinated by the little delivery thing in the city that you see on the wheels. I don't even know the words to say it, but those things get beat up all of the time. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of social norming, I think, is the way that we would have to do it. Like, I think we're 20 years away from all being okay with the thing, coming from the sky or being delivered by a robot.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with this. Some people were concerned about the surveillance aspects of it with cameras. Some people, it was the noise. I think it's the noise that's the killer, because I just don't think you can move anything of mass. There's like military helicopters that are quieter. They have special, I think, extra rotors and things like that to try to like keep it down. It's not like we haven't experimented with this stuff before. It's very important to the military to be quiet. So I don't know that we're gonna see that popping in And I have a lot more to say about it, but I have more to say about the ACP. So we're going to move on to the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is still dead, like Franco. And the question is, there's a new report out from the Brattle Group, and Doug wrote about it. And it said what I think many of us expected, which is that it saved the federal government money rather than costing the federal government money. So, Doug, why don't you take point on this? What you read the whole report, or at least you wrote that you read the whole report and recommended that other people do. Was there anything surprising about it to you?
Report. Well, what it did was it just looked at a few items, and the big item it looked at was telemedicine, and it said that when people, that when people make telemedicine calls versus visiting a doctor, there's a significant savings since a lot of the doctor visits are paid for by Medicaid, Medicare, and veterans benefits. Now, I've been following telemedicine for years. Those savings are real. The Battle Group kind of made some of them bigger than what the other studies have done, which is not untypical when you're trying to get a big number. So, but they came up with like 28 billion in savings, and maybe it's 18 billion, but it's still way bigger than the cost of ACP. And so, because, doctors charge more to the federal government for an in-person visit, especially specialists. And so, and plus that doesn't even count the cost to people to go back and forth to the doctor. They didn't include that in their numbers. And that's what the study missed. There's monstrous social benefits of the ACP, because what's the savings to not have to drive 2 hours from a rural place to go to the doctor in the first place, and that's a savings on the person. And so they didn't even account any of that stuff. So they said that the savings to those 3 healthcare programs was 8 or 10 times bigger than the cost of ACP. I guess not really, 4 or 5 times bigger. And they didn't even touch it. There's 20 other benefits that didn't bother quantifying. So yeah, but that's typical. People in all government programs look in a silo. They go, what's this thing cost? How are we going to fund it? And they don't look at the cross government benefits. They just don't do that.
Kim's either half a reindeer or has a point.
Well, I am half a reindeer too. But I think my question when I read this story was that this happened, ACP happened in a little bit of a bubble of COVID, right? So you had a lot more people going and getting telemedicine, and more hospital loosening the restrictions of telemedicine visits. So is it a real report? Are we talking today's terms, or is there a little bit of marketing happening going on with this study? I guess
that's a good question. And what we have found is that we have sort of settled into about half of the level of COVID of permanent televisits. The fact is that is a real thing now, and there's a lot of it. And so, it's not at the COVID level days, but there's a lot. It's something like 4 or 5% of all doctor visits are now televisits. It's a huge number. So
I want to go to Heather and then Travis also, but I also just want to know that's not like something that just emerges organically. States and the federal government decide about reimbursements, and so the number of telehealth visits is sort of determined to some extent by policy that allows it or discourages it. Go ahead, Heather.
Right.
I'm interested to see how Congress will react to that eventually, but I don't think it's made any. Yeah, Chris, you got it right. I don't think it's made any, we're in a wrong type of administration for that to be broadcast and advertised in a certain way. I think that if we look back at, not only ARPA, but it was CARES Act money that started with the emergency broadband benefit. Those were both meant to be emergency programs. And despite the benefits that clearly came to those who really needed it, it's a little bit depressing that it didn't become for something that Congress focused on, to be very honest, to extend. And I know that there were lots of conversations about it.
Yeah, no, I really want to come back to that because it feeds my main point, but I want to make sure Travis gets a chance to wag his tongue.
We just do ACP on our own. We don't rely on the government. So
were you surprised by this though? I don't know. I feel like you're more focused on what we think of as private sector accounting. And when you take this wider picture, did you look through it and find anything surprising or challenging?
No, do we think that I don't know. Don't you think it's kind of a dead topic at this point, or do you think there's?
I don't think it'll be dead for long. I think it's going to be something that comes back. And frankly, I mean, I take this seriously, and I think that right now the federal government is losing money because more people aren't on. One of the things that it noted in the executive directory, or I don't know if in the executive summary, a recent analysis by Blair Levin found finding out after the ACP ended, 10% of the wireline subscriptions families, they stopped subscribing, and about 70 to 80% of the wireless subscriptions were disconnected, they think. And so that's about where we thought we would end up. I think maybe it's a little bit higher, although the distribution among technology is interesting. But I think the federal government having those people disconnected is paying more money in Medicaid and Medicare and the VA and things like that. So I do think it will come back up, Travis.
Okay. I was just
one of the interesting findings was somebody in Congress could have asked the Congressional Budget Office to consider that before they canceled it, and nobody did. And so
this is my thing.
They would have done that quantification on their own and probably.
So here's the thing, right? This is exactly my reaction, which was that we didn't have to wait till 2025 to do this. Like, this is something that a competent Federal Communications Commission that cared about this would have done in some way. The Biden White House should have done this and had the numbers ready before the program expired to be socializing this and talking about it. And there were multiple ways in which they could have done it, and they didn't. And not only that, it's not because they didn't consider it. They did consider it. I've heard behind the scenes some of the different considerations. They chose not to do it. They chose instead to try to make speeches here or there, or assume that Congress would just renew the program. It was malpractice by the people that supported the program. So it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate.
Wait, how close is that to a rant, Travis?
That's a rant. It was just short. I'm trying not to go on too long.
You know, okay. We haven't had a good rant in quite some time.
It's been a while. This might be the day.
Yeah. His hair looks nice. I mean, he's got everything set for it, but
I still got the glitch. I can't get rid of the glitch.
I mean, it has to be 15 episodes since we had a real rant. So
Doug, I'm curious. So Kim and Travis, I would think you'd be the most suspicious. Do you believe that the ACP saved the government money when you take a whole cost accounting, or do you feel like this is cooking the books just to try to justify something we think should happen?
I'm going to say,
Travis.
I'm going to go 50-50 because, you can do what you want. Here's the thing. I would never sign up for ACP again because I'm the one that had to go around and tell all these customers they weren't getting it anymore.
As an ISP, you would not.
As an ISP. So we look like the bad person. So even if they come out with it again, I'm out because it's not worth all the effort to go sign everybody up, get them hooked up, get them going, and then to turn around and tell them that they don't have the service anymore.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that, though. Not only is it that part of it, but they also gave away a bunch of grants to states and stuff and others through the FCC in order to advertise the program and make sure that people were utilizing it. Mm-hmm. So what's happening there is sort of what plays out in my head. There you go.
Well, imagine if you had factored that income into your financial model and went and got debt against that, and now it was pulled out. Do you imagine? I mean, you'd be in a world of hurt between interest rates going through the roof and losing the program. I mean, it's not a recipe for success.
So let's be clear here, because this is not an isolated incident. This is the Universal Service Fund issue right now, where you have 15 attorneys general from different states, all of them Republican, I believe, leaning, who have said, we want this program to affirmatively go away, the USF. And there are, I'm assuming it's more than 200 companies that must have outstanding debt. I don't know the exact number, but it could be around 500. Doug, I don't know if you have a sense, but there's an incredible number of companies that have counted on that. And yet we have people who are just playing games with USF who want to go from a program that has certainty into an appropriation cycle in which at any point of your 20-year debt, you could lose the income that is needed to pay for it.
Oh, when you count E-rate, there's 1,000 or 2,000 companies that count on Universal Service Fund when you put it all together. But they didn't exactly say that. Those attorneys generals, that actually has an S on the first word, which I can never say right. They said it should be declared unconstitutional. Even they probably assume, I think that all the states liked the ACP results, and they would assume Congress would pick it back up and take care of it. So their point was that it's unconstitutional, not that they hated it. So
Okay, well, thank
doesn't
you.
matter. They still want it. They still want it to get killed. So yeah. So
Yeah, I
But
think it's
the difference is that USF's been around for what, 28 years. ACP was around for like 28 months, right? So
right. No, you're right.
yeah, you should have, if you have a network that's reliant on USF, you should have paid off a substantial amount of that network.
Oh no, there's people that just got USF funds this year, last year. Every year there's new rounds that go out, Travis.
Ugh,
Yeah,
I don't know.
and a lot of the public education and private education libraries utilize services that are purchased through E-rate as the thing, and in that way, like, they get a good deal on those services, but it's partly because they get discounts on the services and the E-rate pays the rest of it. So it's I'm really nervous for how, if they decide that it's not something to move forward with, that's really going to impact the business side as well. It's ugly.
well, and there's some big dollar stuff. The people on RDOF wouldn't get the second half of their money.
Well,
10-year plan.
that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
That's a whole nother thing, but that's a whole lot of money there. So yeah.
All right. We're going to talk about BEAD a bit, and Heather is one of the few people that I trust with this specialty discussion about what's actually happening, what the rules are, what the nuances are. We are going to do a couple of different things in this. To start, I just want to talk briefly about what is next for like Louisiana and the few other states. I think Montana, and who else is one other one that I think is Nevada. Thank you.
Delaware.
Delaware.
Unless it's Nevada, we could have that discussion too. Yeah.
And so the sense is that we all talk about is like, oh, they're basically done. They've selected their grantees. They're going to be moving along. What happens next, Heather? And what is our understanding of the timeline?
So
Heather looks so relaxed before she starts this. She's like, let's go.
Right. So what people need to understand is there are checks and balances in place across our federal bureaucracy in order to ensure that there isn't any fraud or anything happening. So in the case of a couple of these states who have gotten their approvals through NTIA, that is the first part of the approval. Then there's NIST approval. What NIST is that is short for we love in DC, they love their acronyms, don't they? The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Right up there on 270. You can drive by it and wave in Maryland there. It's actually a non-regulatory agency. It's part of the Department of Commerce. And what happens is that they then go and they take a look through all of that paperwork and make sure that it meets the standards that it's supposed to meet, that the frameworks that have been set up and approved internally, that all of those boxes are checked, and then it goes on to the next thing. And they've been doing this. I think they were founded at the turn of the 1900s. The beginning of the 1900s is when NIST started. And generally, given their title, they have a mission, and that's generally to promote innovation and industrial, I think the word is competitiveness, through science, standards, and general technology in order to make sure that we are enhancing our economic security and generally improving the quality of life. So does that make sense? Did I use...
Yes, so that's what they do, and they are the ones that have to sign off before anything can happen. My sense is that no one really knows what the timeline is, and it's kind of up to their discretion as to how long they wait to sign off.
God, I hope not. I hope not. My hope is that they were getting ready and staffing up for what would be, quite the onslaught of things. But keep in mind that they're also doing the work that is already in the mix. So anything so you deal with NIST when you have to have your environmentals reviewed. So when you get a grant and you want to put a shovel in the ground, you have to do your due diligence around that before you start digging. We don't want to dig up any turtles in Maryland. We don't want to, impact the flora and fauna in a way that would devastate the ecology of the area. So it's a permitting process, and NIST is definitely a part of it. They're the ones that usually check the box on the environmental review. They check the box on the tribal review as well, the historical archaeological review. These are things that grantees find out when they go through a process at the federal level. What's interesting about BEAD is that the feds have said, here's money to the state. Here's our guidance on how you're supposed to set up these programs. Here's a 14-step process that you're going to have to go through before you can really get the money. And then we'll work with you on all of these things. The problem is that they don't really have the staff to do that for 56 states and territories in an onslaught of all of it at once. So I don't know how long it will take for them to check the box with Louisiana and Nevada and Delaware. My hope is that they're doing it pretty quick, but we also know that we've got a new administration in there, and they have to get their hands around things. I will say the thing that I don't like is there's a lot of hyperbolic language out there, and to a certain extent, I think it's performative politics because it has to be, and that's just the world that we live in right now.
So can I ask you about that? So when you say that, I think on one side, perhaps the administration side, they're talking about how they're going to change everything, and that's somewhat hyperbolic. We think we don't think they're really going to change everything. In part because it would be very difficult, and frankly, the politics of it probably wouldn't be great for them. On the other side, just to quickly, on the Democrats, there's this language that might be hyperbolic of how everything's going to change and it's going to be a disaster and this and that. So that's the hyperbolic language you're talking about on both sides?
That's the hyperbolic language that I'm talking about on both sides. Everybody needs to calm down. One. Two.
Can we just send you to Washington, D.C. and just start yelling that on like a loudspeaker? Just calm down, everyone.
Just calm down. But the other hyperbolic language is like the name of that, for example, the name of the what was the
Speed Act?
Not that. I don't really care about that, but the hearing, it was Biden's broadband blender. And right. I got to be honest, that's not really getting us anywhere. Like, we know you don't like it. Please stop. Like, can we please have professional conversations that don't necessarily need to involve you reminding everybody that you don't like Biden? We got it. We're fine. Let's move on.
Reminds me of a signature line that I cannot repeat here because of all the words that we try not to use. This is the word we mostly don't use. I'm not the vulgarian, you. A Fish Called Wanda. Wonderful movie.
But here's what I know for sure. What I know for sure is that we want America's broadband to be, to paraphrase someone, the best broadband in the world, right? So when we're hearing these conversations, especially during the hearing that happened earlier this week about how can we make this better, faster, stronger, they sort of, it feels like someone's like rushing the program through the line, the greeting line at an event or something. Like, hurry up and do this, and hurry up and do that, and hurry up and do that. But it's the quality of those conversations that actually really matter. And the Infrastructure Act is essentially an economic development play. So go down me with this well for just a second, because I think it'll help the conversation that I'm pretty sure we're about to have. My hope is that they loosen the strings so that states can make the decisions that they need to make to reach the goals that they've set based on the planning that they've spent 3.5 years doing. Not approving those plans or going back to the drawing board would require millions of dollars and time that they've been complaining about. I do not like that they say that not $1 has been spent on fiber. That's not true. They've been planning for 3 years and they got funds to do it. That money is basically out the door. But ultimately, Infrastructure Act is economic development. So when they're making those decisions at the state level, my hope is that they can pull every tool, but that what they're thinking about is, by going this route with this technology, is it going to help economic development in that area overall? And that to me is the key to making all of this work, having a practical approach to what's been done, acknowledging the hard work that every state office has put in to comply with the law and the guidance that they were given, and in a professional way, have a very distinct path forward on how to get the money out the door as soon as possible. You heard them. You heard them
Do you
talking.
think it's being politicized still? Like, do you think that they really mean for the best when they're making these decisions, or do you think that there's a lot? I mean, I think we all know there's politics involved, but do
There's
you think it's all,
Yeah,
a lot more of that?
my concern is that they're focusing on, we haven't got a thing of fiber out there. We haven't paid any ISP to do anything yet. But that problem is compounded by the fact that they aren't acknowledging that this is an infrastructure build. It's a generational investment. And Chris, like you and I have talked ad nauseum about in the past, it's not going to happen overnight. There's a 14-step process of planning that they had to get through. So now being on the cusp of it, like the Trump administration could claim a huge win if they do it right from here out.
Well,
in a practical way.
Here's the question that I think is what I want to get at. And I want to check. Doug, just a quick yes or no. Have you been paying attention to the results of the states that have recently done round one stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Kim, have you?
Skosh, for the most part. For the most part.
Okay. Well, that leaves just Travis then to guess because the rest of us all know some of the answers. But I'm curious for the audience too. The audience will be with Travis in this. So one of the things that we've talked about from the beginning, and I interviewed Heather in the Grand Old Opry 2.5 years ago, maybe.
Oh yeah.
And you were the only person I was hearing from who was saying this is going to take a while and it's worth it and it's all going to work out. And I gave you an interview in which I was skeptical, and I was even more skeptical on the inside than I expressed. So the question is, now that we see round one popping through, do we have a sense that it is working out or not working out? Travis, you have predicted on multiple times that no one would bid on these. And so I'm curious, we know that in Washington state, 80% of the locations roughly had a bid. We have the results from Arkansas, Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin, Virginia, and Vermont. Vermont's kind of an outlier. So I'm curious, Arkansas, about how many locations do you think got a bid in Arkansas? Oh, and earlier I muted you, Travis. Sorry about that. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, was I being bad?
Your typing was just barely coming through. Don't worry about
it. Okay. So hold on. Run that by me. So somebody actually
Arkansas has like what, 28,000 locations or something like that were eligible. How many of those locations were included in bids from ISPs seeking BEAD funds, do you think?
Well,
percentage-wise.
I think my prediction was there would be no new ISPs. There would just be the current incumbents in the area that would bid.
Okay. You also kept saying that you couldn't imagine anyone bidding.
Well, I guess I haven't kept up on I forget all, have they changed the requirements? Because at the time it was unbelievable.
No, it has remained unbelievable. And so what do you think? I mean, just throw a number, and you know that it's not going to be 10%, or I wouldn't be asking this question this way. So
7.
You think 7% were? So Indiana, Missouri. What do you think for Indiana, Missouri?
6.
So you think very low. Wisconsin, Virginia, you're going to stay really low?
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually closer to the number of areas that weren't served. These places all had more than 90% of the eligible locations. Now, I don't know if Heather, if you know all of them offhand, some of these are all fiber. Like Vermont, it's what, 95% fiber, I think in the end. Yep. For Rye was just reminding me, Arkansas, Indiana, Missouri. And by the way, Jake Varn with Pew States is where he compiled this, and so I should give him credit. That post is just got in the chat there. And I was blown away. Heather, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because, I'll just say, I thought you would be proven wrong.
I yelled at you. I totally yelled at you. That's not.
So I'm sitting here saying I was wrong, and this program is working out to a far greater extent than I expected. Now, I will say we could have Kim. 1 second, let me qualify it. You want to go, Kim?
Let him go.
No, go ahead.
I'll just say that it is entirely possible that these are the best states. And so we will start to see other states fall apart in the way that Doug has predicted a number of states would. So we don't have conclusive evidence, but I will say that from my point of view, I was largely wrong.
Okay, go ahead,
Now,
Travis.
we
I
also
can't wait
don't
for
we
your
also
comment.
don't know that all of these are going to get a grant, because they could have put in $55,000 of passing and won't get the money. So we don't, just because there was a first round bid doesn't mean that they're finished. So yeah.
My goodness.
Well,
Travis,
I think
Go
it's
for
an
it.
appropriate time in the show to ask the obvious question. Hold on. Did I miss something? Is there anyone that's been hooked up with BEAD yet?
First of all, we're talking
Oh.
about an incredibly complex process, and my team has been working on this with a couple of states of solving the puzzle, right, based on what was done. So when we talk about the fact that Arkansas got 98% of their designated areas got at least one application for each of them, to me, I consider that extremely successful. They know exactly what they need to do now in order to figure out the puzzle. And that's the challenge. And I think it's very belittling to the people that are working on these programs to sort of toss it away as if they're not, trying really hard to make this work.
Yeah.
And for
Heather,
example, go for
I mean,
it.
I feel like there is a challenge there, and I've said this before, like where I've criticized the FCC, and then I show up at the FCC I'm on a panel, and I'm looking at these people in the audience, and I'm like, oh, these are the people that I've been saying are doing a shitty job. Like, it sucks. And so there is an element of criticism, but also, like, I think our criticism has largely been at the higher level of the people up above who have made decisions that we think made the program take too long. So I just wanted to, it's a little bit more complicated, I think. Go ahead.
It is. It's a lot more complicated. So let's take Washington as an example, because I think we talked about this briefly earlier this week, Chris. Like, they got 80% of the mapped areas that they were seeking an application for. They got an application, and what they're doing is the first round is meant to identify specifically, okay, I'll give you an example. We've got these 10 areas over here that got one application. We're going to process those first and see if that works out. We're not going to make any awards yet, but we know that those 10 areas could potentially have awards already. We've got another 10 areas over here that we got no bids for. We're going to start working and figuring out how we can either get bids for that, or if there's an alternative technology that we can use. And then everybody else, we're going to send them a note. It's time for round 2. This is the round of fear. You have competition. You need to put your best price in. And then it goes on and on.
I think there's I get what you're saying, Heather, and I think there are a lot of good people doing some good work. Yeah. But like, let's be honest, the process is too flipping complicated. And I think like that we should have people connected by now, and we should have simplified the process. But I don't disagree that there are some really great people trying to do some great things out there. Absolutely.
I think the reason it's taken so long is because there were so many requirements for planning. And my gut tells me that planning is really smart.
But also, I mean, there's the mapping issue. But I'll say on the opposite, if we had great maps coming into this, I don't know that we could have done this process faster. Which is to say, people in the state broadband offices now, I think, are much better, and they know the field better, right, Doug? I mean, a year ago we were like, who are these people? And now there's still some of that, but there's a lot more people who really know what's going on.
Oh, no, they've all come a long way. I mean, there's still a few states that are sort of clueless, but that number is shrinking pretty quickly. So, and there's some states that have been at this for years and are awesome to start with. So, but yes, it's a much bigger challenge if you're Washington and only get 80% versus these ones who got in the 90s. They have a lot of work to do to get the other 20%.
Well, the Western states actually got less money in a lot of cases,
right? And
they have a much higher burden to connect more expensive rural BSLs too. Sorry, Chris, what were you saying? You said I had an answer for that.
Well, just that. I mean, like, I think it's moving forward. I if this program had worked the way that Travis has suggested in the past, in a way that we all liked, it also would have taken a lot of time. Now, some homes would have been connected, but Travis, you and I have talked about the merit of a program where we might have a number of companies do applications and then get an amount of money and prove that they can build, get more money and keep building. That iterative process in which they sort of justified it and then were able to tap larger sums of money would also have taken a long time. We would have had some houses connected, but I don't know, even in that ideal program, which I think would have been better for smaller ISPs and I would have liked in a number of ways. I think in a race between that program in which you're having to evaluate what people have done before you can put more money in, it's one of those things in which, like, I feel like the BEAD program does nothing for a long time in terms of final impact. And then there's like this like avalanche of like fiber built. At least that's the way it looks right now. Whereas the program that you and I had talked about would have been like a slow build that was gaining momentum. And the question is, in the 5-year mark, which one has done more? I don't know that I could say that for sure. But Travis, I want to give you a chance to.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I have no comment. I mean, let's be frank. It's been 3 years. So, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's a long time. And especially when you do these 4-year administrative cycles, I think the initial rules were a little too burdensome for folks, which is the reason that I said I would never bid on it. If somebody else wants to bid on it, that's fine. But I also, because I'm a conspiracy theorist, I have a theory here, which I think is actually genius of why they made it so complicated. Doug, how many passings have been built by private investment in the last 3 years, would you guess?
Oh, I have that number somewhere. It's in the.
Well, I know what it was last year.
In the last 3 years, it's 30 million or something.
So play this through. And again, this is half joking, half reality is. So if you're the federal government and you put this plan out here that we're going to roll fiber out across the country, you slow roll it with a whole bunch of burdensome regulations and rules, and the private sector gets worried and they start pumping capital into these networks and start building them to shrink the BEAD requirement. This me being kind of down on BEAD might actually end up being a genius move, because all that gets left are the very, very difficult people to connect. So
well.
There you
so
go.
Travis, the problem with conspiracy theories is that you can cook them up, and we have, in fact, on this show occasionally, I don't know that I would call that a conspiracy theory, but we have talked about how we were worried. This is another area in which I was prepared to say, looks like I was wrong. We were worried that the impending investment would result in much less private sector investment. And while the stat that I can share now doesn't disprove that, last year was the year in which we had more than 10 million fiber connections built. And according to FBA, it was the single biggest fiber to the home build year ever. Now, possibly without government involvement, there might have been more or might have been less. I don't know. But that's the problem with the conspiracy theories. You could come up with plausible, sort of like crazy explanations for anything. So I don't know that I find that super compelling.
Well, except the forums that I read talk about all of the small operators that were terrified about getting overbuilt with BEAD money. So they went ahead and built it themselves, so that BEAD money wasn't in their area, would not be qualified. So I can
there's not that many of those because it's so costly, though.
Yeah,
that's really a pretty minor set of folks. So, the trouble is we have an exact competing grant program that did it right, which is the Capital Projects Fund, that just basically said, state broadband offices, here's your money. There's a really short set of rules. You guys are the experts. You figure it out. It's half the size of BEAD. It was a lot of money. And
more than 1 million homes have been connected with that money. More than 1 million.
And that money went fast. I mean, all the delays in BEAD are 100% on the doorstep of Congress. The steps that they made them go through are absolutely ridiculous. The 5-year plan that went straight on the shelf in probably 53 of the 56 jurisdictions. All these running around the states talking to people, which most of the broadband offices did pure lip service to.
Well, Doug,
they made all these steps sequential. You had to do 1 and then 2 and then 3, and they could have done them all at the same time. Oh yeah.
I mean, I agree with you, but it's also, there's a little bit of Mr. Miyagi, like wax on, wax off. I forget what he was waxing. I feel like he was waxing a house.
He was waxing a car. He was
painted
waxing
the house and waxed the car, right? Okay. So at any rate, that, I mean, like the 5-year plan, maybe it just benefited the offices that had to go through it. Now, if they paid a consultant to do it, probably didn't work as well. Like,
no, and they
I
all
guess,
paid a consultant to do it.
but I guess my argument would be both that I don't think it was a good way to do it, but also that it probably wasn't the worst way to imagine doing it.
But the
Great
Capital
defense.
Projects Fund didn't have any of those steps, and they got
Right.
along just
Now here's
fine.
where
Yeah.
here's where Heather and I think would disagree, because I think the Capital Projects Fund is exactly how I would do stuff. And the
Yes.
question is whether or not states would get to 99% connectivity that way.
My reminder to you all is that the Capital Projects Fund was an emergency fund, period. This is an infrastructure act, and it was meant to take a long time to do things. The problem is people are still thinking that it's easier just to do it like it's an emergency. That's what I was talking about, is sort of rushing us down the line to get this done. Is they are more concerned about expediency than making it future-proofed in a way that makes practical sense, and also can prove to taxpayers like you and me that the states are making good investments that are good for economic development overall, and that meet the goals of the program to make sure everybody is connected.
So I understand what you're coming at, Heather, but I think when we talk about this as an infrastructure bill, which is great, I think we all on this call believe this is infrastructure, but this is a competitive infrastructure that all the other infrastructures aren't, and I think that's a very big difference that we never really talk about either.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with you there, but and I think we're all in agreement that they could have truncated this process considerably with one planning document, with a proposal in there. The problem is that they were also rushing through getting the guidance out. The guidance changed constantly in the process. There's a lot of criticisms there, but they were doing, I want to give credit where credit's due, though. They were doing their best to comply with the law and to support 56 states in various states of ability, from everybody who had a broadband office to everybody who did not and really resisted creating a broadband office in order to move forward with those funds. So there's a lot of personalities in this, for sure.
Okay, so the BEAD program is now subject to multiple stories, with Department of Commerce Commissioner Lutnick talking about how they're going to change everything. And my expectation, first of all, I think there's a lot of different possibilities of where things go. So I'm not saying this is very likely, but I think the most likely thing to happen is that they will talk about how they're changing everything. They will actually change very little. And then like I think Travis said, or maybe it was Heather, they will take credit when it's rolled out. And that's fine. One of the things that's interesting is there's a collection of changes that are being pushed in a law that the Republicans are pushing, called the SPEED Act, for BEAD speed. And I love the provision that would remove the letter of credit requirement. I don't necessarily like all the provisions in this bill, but
Well, it doesn't remove it, but it removes it from 80 or 90% of the people.
So I was just going to read that, because this is so good. This is what the government should have been doing from the beginning, which is to say the letter of credit would not be required where the amount for the grant is less than 25% of the revenue for that entity, like a business. So if it's not a significant part of the business's revenue, or if it's not a significant increase of the number of customers they're already serving. This is the sort of thing that should be waived regularly for ISPs that have been in this business for a while. And I'm just glad to see this language appearing anywhere. And I really hope, even if nothing else gets through, that the Federal Communications Commission and others adopt this framework moving forward.
Now, the rest of that bill, I'm calling the packing peanut bill, because all the rest of the changes are completely cosmetic and they don't mean crap.
Well, it's early on in that process too, right, Doug?
Yeah,
So
yes.
This is where everybody goes back to school and remembers how a bill becomes a law, and understands that it's got to go through a committee. It's going to get marked up.
Heather,
things are going to get changed.
Heather, come on, you're losing credibility. How many bills have gone through that process lately? I mean, I don't know that she claimed credit for it, but Speaker Pelosi was like certainly a pioneer of the breakdown of regular order, and responding perhaps to other things. But I think what happens now is a bill becomes a press release, and at some point leadership engages in negotiation with someone else, and then that language is or is not adopted, unfortunately.
Yeah, bills are
Is that
getting
a new-
packed up 10. They're getting packed up 10 and 15 at a time and rubber stamped. There's not a whole lot of review going on right now. So
I still have
this is
faith
not
in our
normal times.
House and the committee system, and that they will, appropriately do the work that they've been hired to do in a professional way, and play well with each other. I'm
Well, I
going to be
hope that you're right.
the
Well, I mean, I'll
positive person on this call today about that.
when we disagree and you're right, it seems to work out well. So we'll keep that trend going.
Okay.
Anything else we want to talk about on BEAD?
Yeah, they changed the name. The acronym.
Oh, did they?
I think well,
Not
the bill
again.
does. The
Not
bill does. It's BEAD, but they changed what it stands for. They got rid of the word equity out of it. The bill changes that to something else, whatever. So yes.
Well, I just keep thinking about that little white bill sitting on the hill on Capitol Hill when I was a kid. Remember that? That was good.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
good takeoffs on that if you're interested.
That he obviously has very good faith in the process. So yeah.
I'm an observer of reality is what I attempt to be. Y'all can tell me in the comments when I get it wrong.
Don't you worry, we do.
Have
We
you
tell
ever
all the
been
time.
wrong? Yeah, I don't remember the last time Chris was wrong. Does anyone else? I think. Yeah.
He said it earlier. Didn't you hear him? He was like, I was wrong.
I mean, he owes me like 50 years of chicken wings at this point. So
The Starlink has a residential light plan, and I was going to pass over it, but I was like, maybe people are kind of unfamiliar. It's kind of interesting, and it's $80 a month, which is compares to $120 a month for the regular residential plan. They recently, set up a Starlink has a system of prioritization in during peak times, which is something that I think is far better than what we've seen from the telecommunications companies, where they just give you a cap for the whole day or the whole month. Starlink caps just during peak congestion, which is, I think, the more honest and in a good way to do it. And so the residential light plan basically throttles you during those congested times, and you save some money on it. And you also are limited to 50 to 100 megabits per second. Travis, you're Mr. Starlink. Well, you used to be when you used to travel around the country in your glorified Winnebago. What do you think of this?
I guess I'm kind of neutral on the whole thing. I've got plenty of friends that use Starlink and love it. I don't necessarily know that. I keep asking if they've ever been throttled. In the areas they're in, it has not been an issue. So I that's just the practical, I suppose if you're in a really dense area. I know when we were out in Quartzsite, Arizona during the big RV thing, we did get a little bit of packet loss, but that was also in the early days of Starlink. So have not had any experience since.
Yeah, I mean,
But
Starlink has now got waiting lists in 6 or 7 states again, and so they're
They like
getting
the
busy
past problem.
areas. So
Interesting, though. They're
so
pumping up.
I mean, so they're going to have that, and so if you're in those areas, you're going to get restricted sometimes, and that. But but they're telling you right up front that that's what you're buying. You're saving $40 a month, so it seems like a reasonable trade-off to me. So
And Ruben just called what I was going to say. Like, we're calling $80 affordable.
you.
Is that
That's
really,
not affordable.
do we really believe
yeah,
that?
but you got to remember what they're competing against. Most of the big fixed wireless guys start at $100. I mean, let's get serious.
Well, and
here.
I mean, what's
Oh,
Doug talking about with Charter Spectrum and Comcast? I mean, certainly there's some people getting $30 a month for an intro, but then they're at $75-$80 a month. No, it's not affordable, but it's a heck of a lot better than $120 a month.
But they also have
Right.
low income plans too, right? And I mean, I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
the
the
low
difference.
income plans that are important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought it was
No,
amazing producing 15,000 Starlink dishes a day right now. That's what the manufacturing plant in Texas is doing.
How long before those dishes are? I consider LEO technology to be, especially to be something of still emerging in a lot of ways. So how long before they'll have to replace those almost $600 units in order to continue service? And they're going to make the user pay for it. So the concern that I have is it's still an affordability thing. because they're not going to build the cost of that user terminal into the monthly costs after you're in there. And on the pricing, what you're paying for is to reserve capacity. People need to understand how satellites work. They rotate around the globe, and when they come over you, they know exactly who's got how much capacity they have for there, which is why they can throttle and not.
This is where, I mean, the states are, my impression is, I think Maine did this in New Mexico. They are doing quality agreements as part of this program if they're being subsidized for it. So, so presumably that is, but I don't know your question about the dishes. I would assume that these dishes will continue to work for a significant, like sort of like 5 years or so at least.
And then in order for them to continue on, they would have to pay another $500 or $600 for the new equipment that would be required. So
my guess is they're going to work forever. But if you don't upgrade, your old dish is going to work like crap. Is probably what will happen.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that Travis, go ahead, then I'll go.
No, I think you could attribute it to your router. Like, if you bought a 2.4 gigahertz router back in the day, technically it still works. But as Starlink gets access to more and more spectrum, the newer dishes will have that built in, and the older dishes just won't communicate on that. No different than our cell phones and whatnot. I've actually been pretty impressed up here. I was more worried that the dishes would start failing, by being out in the elements and with all the snow. And again, I'm using my example of 2 people here that have it, and knock on wood, 3 years so far they've had 0 issues. So
that's great.
Now let's talk about that though.
But
let's talk about that, because fixed wireless has the same issue, and those last about 6 years, and then the elements get them. I mean, the hot, the cold, the hot, the cold, the rain, the snow.
Let's not kid ourselves. GPON gear, XGS PON gear, network switches. This whole industry is built on self-obsolescence.
Yes,
and it's
but for fixed wireless, the weather gets it. They actually deteriorate. I mean, you can.
Well, and so does Leo as well.
Yeah,
we have.
Well, let's
absolutely have those problems in there.
I want to come back to something that Kim said, because I think Kim nailed it earlier with a comment about infrastructure. Which is that we don't seriously treat this. I mean, this is internet access is something that is in between what we consider to be essential infrastructure and a a kind of nice thing. We recognize that people need it, but we haven't actually developed a system to make sure that everyone can afford it. And that is in part because it is very difficult in a market environment to figure out an appropriate approach. We're fumbling around with that. But to be clear, I always like to think, well, what if it was the richest people who were lacking access? I think we would have figured it out by now, but I think there's a real lack of seriousness among our elected officials, mostly at the federal level, where I think it's the biggest issue, but also at the state level of trying to figure out, okay, if we're going to go on a market-based approach and we're going to just try to figure out how to subsidize people, how do we do that in an effective manner? I'm nervous about that. Or the approach that I would favor, which is to say the local governments and states have to figure out how to have a solution for people that are most vulnerable. And that might mean building networks in targeted areas. It might mean public-private partnerships. It might mean subsidies in some areas. But, I just don't see any of this really happening yet.
And he just made the full circle back to ACP. How did he do that?
I'm so good. Travis, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this affordability. I just wanted to add one other element that I picked up on is the folks on the forums that I monitor. Historically, in these very challenged areas, we're using like Dish Network or DirecTV to get their television content, and they were using some sort of cellular internet service. By getting Starlink, they've been able to cancel their satellite television, and actually their net spend per month is actually substantially less than what it was because they just stream everything now. So when we talk about affordability, I get it with you. I get what you're saying, but they're able to retire an older technology to help save money.
So this is exactly the same argument that I make with municipal networks, where my argument would be that if in an ideal situation, if you said, Chris, we're going to give you absolute power in a community that we're trying to figure out a solution for a majority of people, but only a few of them totally lack service, I would say, all right, everyone's going to pay $20 a month to the city. The city's going to have a fiber optic cable to every home. We're going to make sure there's a like low income program available. We're going to have open access services to compete for higher level services among ISPs that want to use it. Travis, I know that you would not like this plan because you want to own it and such. But it would be the same accounting, which is to say that a lot of people would end up saving a tremendous amount of money and everyone would have service. We find that people are suspicious of that and would expect that they would not actually see all of those savings by cutting some of the bills that they're already paying to then get a municipal service or something like that. Yeah. No, and I know that it doesn't work for you. And like I would say that a city in which you're serving, they probably wouldn't be tempted to do it. But
and we've talked about this before. The issue there is, with the constant leadership change, it's a big initiative like on this cycle, but the next cycle it isn't, and it is, and it's just it would have what.
And you have a lot of politicians grandstanding and who think that they know more. And it gets very finicky. Unless you have a muni system with consistency, I think they're very hard to operate. And that's why in my former employer, Utopia, there's a board, like a governing board, but there's like management in-house that is consistent, which I think is a different model than you see in other cities.
Kim, I was always curious because, the one thing I will say is if you have a long-term contract with a city, that works pretty well. And it goes across administrations. When Utopia was doing it, would they get 20, 30-year agreements?
Like, what do you...
No, it's not like that, Travis.
Is that, no, but it's not with the city because the city technically owns it, right? The city is one of the owners is the difference where a private company goes in and offers a 20-year agreement to a city. It's just a different model on that front.
Fair enough.
I just wanted to suggest this question here about open source hardware and firmware, the FCC suppressing it in Wi-Fi. I'd love to talk more about that on a future show. I have no idea who to have on. Sasha Meinrath might be a person, but if anyone knows a good guest, throw it in the chat or whatnot. I'd be happy to explore that. I want to wrap up BEAD or actually Starlink and talk about the OpenVault report. Dougie, I'm curious about your thoughts on people's actual usage of the internets.
Well, the average is now up to 700 gigabytes a month nationwide. That's a big old number. If you would have said that number 10 years ago, everyone would have said you're completely on drugs. And of course we were, but they would have said it. They would have said it in a derogatory way. So. That's a really large amount of usage. It used to be a tiny fraction of that. The last 4 years after COVID's been over, households have used almost exactly 50 more gigabytes each year in growth. That's a lot of growth. That's a lot of extra usage when you think about it. So
I left Comcast after they brought me the mid-split, and I was performing very well, but I left because they were charging the overage if you use more than a terabyte, and 25%, 24% of the people using the internet now apparently use that amount per month.
Yeah, it's up to 24% using more than a terabyte every month. So that's just now the new normal amount.
Did I say gigabyte?
You probably did, and
yeah,
it's terabyte. Yes.
I always
wait a minute. Was he wrong a second time?
Listen to what I'm thinking, not what I'm saying.
It's a lot of wrongness in one show, Chris. I don't know if we can handle this right now.
Plus the glitches. This is really not.
I blame Delta. Classic sort of situation. I was flying into Atlanta. They screwed up and they were 40 minutes late coming out of San Antonio and came into Atlanta, and I'm like, all right, I could just barely make it. And I made it. I was within 1 minute of when the door was supposed to close, and they had closed the door 5 minutes early and sent the plane out. They literally had decided to send the plane early from the gate. And so I spent the night in Atlanta, which was...
I think that's a personal problem. So what does that say about you, that they didn't care enough about you to wait for the plane to leave?
It might have been a positive reason why they did it.
If you were important, they might have held the plane for you. So.
Yeah, no, I would get to travel with important people from now on. Anyone else have any thoughts about how traffic is changing? I kind of jumped away from that.
Well, the ILSR jet wasn't running that day, or what?
Well, I think the other big news. Well, the other big news is the average of, what is it, 46 or 49 upload. That's a big old number too. That used to be virtually nothing. So
What do you attribute that to, Doug?
it's a combination of streaming, gaming, it's what we're on right now. I mean, these shows, these things use a lot of it. So it's just all those things. And then we've got all that, like a fourth of it is your stupid computer constantly communicating that you don't even know about. All your apps are constantly pinging their damn, services to give them all your secrets. And then of course, we all work all day on Microsoft Office, and it constantly saves to the cloud. I mean, all these things are new that weren't here 3 or 4 years ago. So it really adds up. So.
Okay, we were going to talk also about bankruptcies and such. I just happened to see the 2 different private company bankruptcies and TrueLine closing its doors over the past week, and was curious if we're starting to see a trend. I mean, we talked about consolidation, but obviously if you're not consolidating, then you might be in trouble and having to go through bankruptcy.
I think I have a question on this, Chris. Are we seeing this because BEAD has, we haven't seen BEAD come out the door, and everybody was basing their business models on BEAD, or do you think this is more business practice related? I think that is my question, because I think you're seeing a lot of the industry sitting there waiting for this money to come for the past 2 years, and they haven't seen it executed on, so they can't just keep their doors open, just willy-nilly waiting on this BEAD to come.
There's definitely some of that. There's definitely some of that. Yeah.
I mean, there's a,
but I don't know if we have more than there's 2 or 3 bankruptcies every quarter. There always has been. I mean, it's not that unusual. You just happen to see 2 of them today. So
well, that's what I was curious about. Yeah. I mean, at the same time, I have very little respect for the average private equity firm, where it seems to me that they never understood, when you're like 10 and you're like, whoa, imagine if an ant was like 30 times bigger, only it turns out you can't do that because the circumference doesn't increase proportional to the volume, right? Like you just have at a certain point, it crushes itself. And it's similar when you take a fiber company and you're like, we're just going to grow it by 100 overnight. It'll be cool. It doesn't work.
Grain Management, who is part of the TrueLine, has experience in the telecom space. That they're not just a newbie walking into the telecom space. Grain Management absolutely has had experience. So I have no idea why they closed, but I don't think this is one of those willy-nilly new ones that came on the market. So
and you never find the true story. Sometimes it's inter-management fights. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why companies implode. So you hardly ever hear the truth. So yeah.
So we don't know.
No, I would be a little worried if that was my BEAD contractor. So they better call one of these 2 ladies on the call here.
Well, that's one of the other things is that I'm sure
and
you all
don't worry, I'm going to arm wrestle Heather to see which one they call. So Heather, get ready. Start doing those
next
push-ups.
next episode. Yeah.
I get these. I get sometimes requests from cities or people that find out about us because they're frustrated with a subcontractor that went through and had what seems to them a high number of problems. And you get these news stories. I saw Sci-Fi and Rockford kept popping up as people were really annoyed at how the subs built it out. And I don't know, I'm just curious, do you have a good system to try to figure out whether or not it's just the normal process and that people don't like their gardens being messed up, or if the sub is actually quite poor?
You're talking to me and Heather about this?
I'm curious. I'd love if you and Heather have an answer for it, but anyone.
I think it's just dependent. I think that every construction company has mistakes. Every construction company doesn't have great subs. And I think it's a constant battle of replacing them, hearing from the customer, and going forward. This is not a perfect industry like nothing else. No other industry is. And we have our flaws, but it's more about picking the construction contractor that's really going to hear you and work through the problems, either one.
Yeah, because I agree. Most of the problems I've ever seen are because they hired these little 7-man subs and they're just dreadful. They got to count them and start over. So some of those folks are really bad. So yeah.
I guess I would say half are contractors, half are the homeowners. The first issue is the homeowners have no idea that there is this concept of a public right-of-way.
Right.
Most homeowners that you talk to have never been through a major construction project in their yard. So this is, and most of these municipalities have never been through a major construction project. They've done like
major telecom.
Yeah, they've done a street here, a street there, maybe some service drops, but you're talking about boring in front of every single home and, you know, putting new infrastructure in. It just, you're going to have issues. I think the bigger question is, how do the ISPs that are hiring these contractors deal with it? If they just try to wash their hands, I guess our issue, we always deal with it. We pay if there's problems, but some ISPs don't. They're like, well, that's the contractor's problem.
Well,
I was wondering about that,
the-
Travis. Travis, you're in front of like 180, 200,000 locations. And so I don't feel like I've seen a whole lot of stories of like the local news just trying to get a rise out of people by talking about like, you know, your practices.
No, I mean, we've hit so many things underground, from transmissions to a Volkswagen to a refrigerator, you know, different gas lines, different sewers, different water. It's just how you respond to it. We fix what we break.
But I think that's the point, Travis. It's that you can't be like, you have a lot of in-house crews, and do you sub some stuff out, or is it all in-house for you?
Yeah, we sub out. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's the partnership, right? You're not playing the blame game of it's a sub and then them blaming you, right? It's fixing the problem and really putting the customer first. And I think that's why Travis is probably one, because you're not playing. A lot of places are like, well, that's not us, that's them. And then you put the customer in the middle, and that's the last thing anybody wants.
Heather, I'd like you to come on and defend the blame game, please.
Nobody wants to get the phone call that someone has to, that someone on one of the contracting teams hit a sewer line, and now there's a house with a basement full of sewage. Actual thing that happened on a project that we worked on. It's a terrible situation.
If that happened to me, to bring things even more for a circle, I would literally go to my wife and be like, it's a good thing I didn't finish that project. Been waiting 8 years, and I knew that this would happen.
And now somebody's going to take care of
it.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, for the most part, any of the public projects that are out there, there's a requirement for insurance and such that has to be in place to make sure that you can make that stuff, right again. But nobody wants that call. Nobody wants to deal with it either. It's the bad.
But it's not the insurance. It's really it's the way Travis said. It's the people. You run right out and talk to the homeowner, and you go, "We're going to fix it." And if there are builders who do not do that. That's
Ruben just made a comment about WISP, but I don't know. Most of the frustration I see is with fiber deployments that are underground. That's where I see.
It's the mess they make. Nobody likes the mess. Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is the mess. After one or two rainstorms, it's all gone. And so, you know, you get in there, you do the work, you try to educate people. You know, I'm not above a couple Starbucks gift cards here and there to solve problems, or buying some petunias. Heck, I've bought somebody a new driveway one time just because, you know, you just have to, because you can't get the reputation out there that you're a hack and slash operation.
What if you gave an Amazon gift card and then the drones came? Like, let's bring it back full circle that way.
The drones came.
But Travis, I suspect that you have a process in place to make sure people aren't fraudulently trying to get you to pay for their home improvements. So there must have been a case that was on the edge where you couldn't really tell if it was.
So here's the pro tip for anyone building fiber networks: go video the neighborhoods before you start construction.
First, yes.
Yep. Because you don't. Hey, all homeowners are not the same. You got your scammers out there too. And if you've got a video of what the ground looks like before you started and after, that solves problems.
No. All right. So we're going to wrap. Next week, we're back because in 2 weeks, I'm gone for the whole week for a tribal broadband boot camp. And I think, Travis, you're gone too, right? Because I was trying to get you to come to this one. And so you must be heading out.
I will be in Thailand.
So next week, you're available still, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So we're going to go next week, and then we'll probably just go 2 weeks after that on the regular. So Heather, thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime. Where's your tribal broadband boot camp going to be this time around?
We're back at Rantanen Town Ranch in Southern California, where we have we have a Calix E7 with GPON going out to like 7 different sites, or no, 5 different sites.
When you see my friend Matt Rantanen, you say "Go Cougs."
Oh, I absolutely will. I can't hear about Washington without thinking of Matt always saying "Go Cougs." It's always the arm up too.
Yeah. Sorry.
Actually, next week we'll have Nick Pappin on, I believe, who is a Go Cougs guy also. He works for Washington Extension Office. And Doug, he would like to talk to you more, and I'm super interested in this, whether anyone will care about the maps after the BEAD money is distributed. So he reached out specifically to ask if he could put on the boxing gloves and join us. So we're going to be doing that, and we'll find some other fun stuff to talk about too. But the regular time next week.
I got to say my last words. I boxed one year. I have perfect record. 0-10. I was so good.
I
I
have to say that's evidence against the brain damage from boxing, because you're doing pretty good.
Yes.
Oh, the boxing, the football. He's sharp as hell. What'd you say, Travis?
Oh, I thought he meant in Nintendo. You're talking real boxing. Huh?
Oh no, real boxing when I was young. Yeah.
I
was
also
not very good.
Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. It's been another fun episode of Connect This.